Hi everyone, I'm Nigel Saunders, and we're back for part 3 of my bonsai forest and my Ginseng Ficus. Just yesterday, everything started to green up out here. All my cedars, or my thuya, they turned from kind of their winter colors, which is an olive color, sort of a rusty olive color, to a bright green color. So they're just getting there. The larches, the buds are getting a little bit of green on top now. So yeah, definitely getting very, very close to repotting time for my outdoor trees. Here's the new mica pot that I got from Hong. So that'll be nice to plant something in that. And I have another mica pot that I've got to plant something in this year. So that'll be fun. Here's a method for keeping the birds away from your moss. It stops them kicking the moss away, and so far it's working well. Let's go in the greenhouse now and finish painting up the display bases for our Vietnam style bonsai pots. In part 2 of this video, I started painting up the 3D printed bonsai pots and display stands. So today we're going to be finishing these here in the Bonsai Zone. The base on this pot was printed in one piece, so it's a solid piece. The one on the left-hand side was printed in 2 pieces and joined in the middle, and it has a wire pin running through here, so it's really strong. But it has this crack or this seam going up the middle here, so I'm going to fill that with some automotive spot putty. You can buy this automotive spot putty at any automotive store, or some of the big box stores. If they have a automotive self-repair section, you'll find it in there. So I'm going to open it up, and I have a little spatula on the end of this paintbrush, so I can just get a dab of it out like that, and then I just squeeze it into the cracks here on the seam. It kind of has the consistency of toothpaste, so it's not very hard to spread. And you just want to fill those seams with the putty like that. And when the putty dries, we just sand it smooth, and the seam disappears. While the automotive spot putty is drying, I'm going to start painting my other base with the shiny black around the edges here. So here I go. I didn't sand the primer. I've just let it do its self-leveling thing, and it should leave a pretty nice finish. Yeah, it's looking nice and shiny and smooth. I'm going to paint around the inside edge too. I don't have to be very precise. I just want that covered up so you don't see the primer color, but I do want that primer color on the base here, so if the gravel or dirt rubs away, you still see an earth tone. Here's a look at the display stand now with the black edging painted. You can see a little bit of the 3D printing texture, but I kind of like that. It's like carbon fiber on a race car. It shows its origins. Yeah, that's looking good. I think the spot putty's dry now, so I'm going to sand that. It's down here. I'll start by filing the straight edges with just a normal file, a fine file. And the rest of the surfaces I'll have to use sandpaper to get into those curves. So I do have some sandpaper out here. Let's break off a little piece, and I'll go in and get all those curves. The spot putty sands really easily, so it's not hard to do. Alright, I'm ready to put the top coat on. We'll see how good my body job is. I can still see the seam. It's not bad on top. I can still see a bit of a seam down the edge here, but it's better than it was anyway. I finished painting the black edging around the base of the pots. So next I'll be working on making the concrete look like concrete. The first step to create the concrete finish on the pots is to put a dark wash on it. I'm going to mix up my wash now, so I'm going to put some thinner. And then a little bit of black paint. Just kind of mix that together to make a light wash. And that can get painted on our gray primer. Here I go with the wash now. This brings out all the details in the plastic. And it's always best to start light with your wash, and then you can always make it darker. I always keep a Kleenex on hand, just in case I get too much on in one spot and I have to go in and dab it off. I'm going to do all the surfaces, and then I'll come back and add more staining and shadows to it. So I'll just give it a light wash all the way around first. You want to make sure you get all your surfaces covered so you don't miss any. There's a lot of surfaces to something like this. I've got my first coat of wash on, so I just went light. I hope you can see, kind of bringing out some of the details. So I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to go over with another wash coat. My first wash coat is dry, so I'm going to go in and add shadows underneath all the lips and kind of darken in some of the areas to look like, you know, random stains and stuff dripping down. So I want it a little darker under here. Again. Anywhere where you think stains may accumulate. Next I want to go inside, make sure I got all the areas covered that I wanted to cover, so there's no, you know, plain gray anywhere that you would see. So just, you know, side all the columns here. Make sure we got weathering on all the surfaces, so nothing stands out as being not finished. And add a bit of dry brushing too, just to kind of get some good random stains on it. Okay, that's good. We'll set that aside to dry, and I better work on my other columns. I haven't even put a wash on them yet, so I'll do that. I'll get my wash going. And I think I have all the surfaces covered now with a wash, yeah. Okay, so we'll let that dry. The next step is to apply the concrete texture to the pot. So I've rounded the end of a sponge here, and I'm going to be dabbing a dark gray color on the pot. For this coat, I'm going to use my gray primer and add a little bit of black to it to darken it up. And then I'll use my sponge, dab it in the paint, and I gotta get most of it off the sponge, so you're just kind of dabbing a texture on like that. So the sponge kind of gives the concrete texture. We want to go all the way around. It also helps tone down the weathering a bit from the black wash. We'll want to inspect all the surfaces. Make sure we haven't missed any when it's all done. think that'll do for the dark coat. For the next step, I'll be using the other end of the sponge and putting a light concrete texture on it. So I'll mix the gray primer and add some white to it, and we'll dab that on. You can see it bringing out all the edges. Gives it a more three-dimensional look. That would look with the pot on. Yeah, that's looking good. So I think that concrete texture is done. I'll use the same sponge technique with a light coat on my pot now. So I'll put this one away to dry, and we'll get this one out. All right, here I go. So again, highlighting the top edges. I'll continue working on pot number 2, and we'll come back and see what it looks like when it's all done. I finished putting the light coat on the pots now. Almost done. The last thing I want to do is give it some green weathering, so to simulate algae and lichen growing on the concrete. So I've got some olive green or olive drab that I'm going to do a light wash and put some stains and just bring it to life with a bit of green color. So I've got my olive drab color, and again I'm going to create a light wash with it. So I'll put a bit of color in the palette here, and then we'll have to add some thinners to it. I found the green color really sells it as concrete. Right now it looks quite black and white, cold, but when you add a bit of green staining to it, yeah, it gives it that realistic look to it. Okay, so I've got my thinners now, and here I go. I'm going to try some staining here. So just kind of adding some weathering. Make it look like algae's growing in some of the areas on it. You can also break up some of the surfaces if they're a little flat looking. You can add a bit of algae in it. Brings them to life. You don't have to put a whole lot on. It's just got to be kind of subtle. And that's almost about it, I think. I don't want to overdo it. Sometimes less is better. If it's there but you don't really notice it, it kind of looks more real. I'm just toning down. There's a few areas that were a little white here from the light wash. I can just tone those down with the green a bit so they don't stand out so much. Yeah, I think that face is done now. So I'll rotate the pot around. Rotate it right around. So you can see without any green, and then with the green. Yeah, it just adds a little believability to it. So I'll continue finishing the pot up and my pillars over there, and we'll come back and have a look at it. I'm going to work on the ground cover in the bottom of the trays next. So I'm going to make one a dry sort of landscape, so it'll be gravel and dust and dirt, and the other one will be more lush, so it'll have green moss to look like grass. I'm going to plant this pot with the dry landscape underneath. And the pot that's removable, I'll put the lush moss here so I can remove the pot and the moss will get all the sunlight to keep it growing nice and green. We started off the day with really nice sunshine, but if you can see behind me, there's a storm blowing in. I think it's going to rain. I can feel the cold air coming in now. So I'm going to have to get everything inside before it starts pouring, and we'll keep working maybe indoors. I just finished bringing everything in from the greenhouse, and then it started to pour rain. I was hoping the rain had stopped and I could get outside and collect moss and gravel for underneath the pots here, but it just kept raining. So I'm going to have to finish this up in part 4 of this series. In part 4 of this series, I'm going to start the day at a bonsai pot sale. A former club member will be selling a lot of their bonsai pots they've collected over the years. So I'm going to head to that. Also in part 4, I'll be planting the ground cover underneath the pots, and I'll be picking out a tree and planting it in this pot. So I hope you join me for part 4. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me here in the Bonsai Zone.